This is the Maida Initiative, conversation without compromise.
My dad said that a Muslim is required to do three major things in his life. One is a daily task of 17 repetition of the salat, the prayer, which I've been doing that ever since, I don't know, when I was a little kiddo. I've been praying the prayer every morning, starting before the sunrise and then throughout the day, 17 repetitions of the salat. But then he said there is also once every year, a good Muslim must fast during the month of Ramadan. And he said, you are doing that ever since you've been 9 years old. And that's what I've done. I mean, that was required us to do, and that's what we did. He said, you must, and he said, sure. He didn't give us choices. So ever since 9 years old, I was fasting. But he said, a good Muslim must perform one more duty, and that is required for all Muslims, and that is to go to the pilgrimage of Hajj, to the two cities of Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. So at age 14, he took me to the Hajj. And then after that, we went to Syria. It was a 1 month pilgrim, the whole thing. And by the age 15, I felt, okay, this is the Islamic Revolution, very new, post-revolution time. The war between Iran and Iraq has already started. So things are happening in Iran, a lot of excitement, a lot of juvenile reactions in the streets. We were over the shoutings of death to Shah and death to America. That is over. Propaganda is over. Now everybody is focusing on the war between Iran and Iraq and the aftermath of the revolution. All the youth of my age were excited about that. Yeah, we are free of the dictatorship, so-called, which I disagree today, of the era. And now we are free under the Islamic rule, and we have to live a Islamic and Muslim, a good Muslim life. One of those days, I was 15 and a half years old. My dad called me and said to bring something from our home, it was a summer, to his shop. My dad had a small business. And I said, how do I do that? I've never ridden any public transportation. That had a car, mid-class wealthy man, that's always taking us anywhere we wanted to go. And he was at his shop. He said, so his shop was on the other side of the town in our city, which in Arabic, you might understand Arabic. Mashhad means the place of martyrdom. That is the name of my city.
Oh, I've been in Mashhad.
You have been in Mashhad?
Yes,
Oh,
I traveled when I was in Ashgabat, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the...
Ali's grandsons.
Exactly. I
went to there too.
The place of the martyrdom of the 8th Imam of the Shiites.
Yeah.
So it has made my city the first most religious city in Iran and the third religious city for the Shiites after Najaf and Karbala in Iraq. So he said, okay, catch bus number 31. I do still remember that. He said, go to that such and such intersection, catch number 31, and count this many stations. At such and such station, get off the bus. Cross the street is our store. Simple, right? So all I needed to do is just to keep my mind on counting the number of bus stops. And the bus went a different direction that Dad was taking us with his car. Of course, it was a public transportation. I didn't know that at the time, but it was exciting to see things that I've never seen. On his route, bus number 31 went into a roundabout called Meydan Sevvom Esfand, the third of the 12th month of Iran's square. And there, for the first time ever, I saw a building with a dome and a cross on top. And it was totally out of the context. In the most religious city of Iran, Mashhad, a church, and I was smart. I knew this church. So it's impossible to have a church building in this city. Immediately a flashback started coming to my mind of an action that two friends of mine, Masoud and Majid and I, the three of us, did a few weeks before that. A few weeks before this incident, we, the three of us, joined a mob of people and we burned a bookstore that belonged to one of the opposition groups to the Islamic Revolution. We just burned the whole store into ashes. It was so cool. So I thought, we're going to do the same thing. I just got off the bus, kept remembering the number of stations, and I said I'll catch up again. I went to the building, knocked the door. Long story short, nobody opened the door. I pushed the door, and the door was open. For the first time ever in my life, I walked into a church building, and surely enough, it looked like a church. It was it was an Armenian church.
Similar, yeah.
Similar
The
to
Russian
the
Orthodox
churches in the
yeah.
exactly. So I walked. It was like a church that we used to see in movies. There was a cross. There was some icons. It was beautiful and nice and clean. There were some candles at the back, and absolutely nobody was at the church. I could burn the church without being in trouble. There were even candles on. I just needed to put the candles on the pew. That's all I needed. But it was not as challenging as burning a bookstore and fighting with people, etc. I wanted a bit of excitement. So I went out, went to the dad's store, didn't say anything. And that evening with the two friends, Majid and Mansour, we met, and I told him, and everybody goes, oh, let's do it tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, we took the same bus to the same church, and I told him that the door is even open and there's nobody, absolutely nobody in the whole church building. It's ready for us. I pushed the door, and my first statement was wrong. The door was locked. We knocked the door. An elderly lady opened the door. And in our culture, maybe the same in Turkmenistan, we have a lot of respect for elder people.
Yeah.
I mean, culturally, it's a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
And then she came, and her face was pale compared to the color of my skin, and her hair was white. So kind of just not just the respect for her age. I felt she must be a religious person. And I said, "Are you Mrs. Church?" And she gave me a weird look. I said, "Is Mr. Church here?" I didn't know the term pastor. And she said, "We call that person Keshish, pastor." But no, our pastor died, and we buried him yesterday around this time. I felt very bad. At the same time that they were burying a person, you shared that you've been dealing with the issue of death and of your uncle and questioning God. And the same thing. I just kind of maybe being too young, maybe being too naive, maybe being afraid of death, etc. Culturally in Iran, at least back then, we had a lot of respect for the person who is dead, even if it's an unrighteous person. Or we just kind of, I felt bad that when they were burying a dead person, I was trying to bury the building. So I just said, let's go. And then she said, yeah, I'm sorry, but if you go just about half a kilometer north, make a left at the National Garden. Behind the National Garden of Mashhad, there is another church. They have Farsi preacher, and they have a lot of Iranians like you. And I said, you're kidding me, right? There's more than one church in our city. The three of us walked, and we just kind of had a lot of jokes and laughed, etc. And then we walked, and sure enough, as soon as we made a left turn behind the National Garden, there was a huge yellow sign with a cross at the center in Farsi. It says, God is love, and the verse Matthew 28. And I just, oh boy. And then we knocked the door. This time, instead of a Mr. or a Mrs. Church, an Iranian, in our opinion, smart Muslim opened the door. Because he looked like you and I. And he had no accent like hers. She had a deep accent, an Armenian accent. He had no accent. And he had a lot of books in he was carrying a lot of books. And I asked him, at this time I said, is the Mr. Keshish, Mr. Pastor here? And he said, no, he comes here on Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. And if you want to talk to him, come back on Friday afternoon. By the way, if each of you take one of these books, you will make my work easier. And I said, how much? He said, free. And I said, good Muslim. He is robbing the Christians. And I said, yeah, of course. So I thought he's a janitor. And I thought, oh, good Muslim. He's trying to rob them. So we'll steal three free books. And it was a New Testament. It was a paperback. Later on, I learned that man was the youth pastor of the church. He never said, I'm a pastor. I'm a leader. He just said, hey, take one of these and make my job easier. Come back on Friday. So, for the first time ever, James, for the first time ever in my whole life, I read the entire New Testament from Matthew to Revelation in 3 days. The entire New Testament in 3 days. After that, I have done this as a part of my spiritual journey over and over again, and I enjoy it. But then that first time that I read, as I was reading the gospel, I was realizing, of course, it's a corrupted book. It's a horrible book. Look at that. There's a story. It's kind of, there is no sacrifice. It's just Jesus walked into a wedding. What? And he turned water into wine. What? And he was with them. And at the wedding, supposed to probably he was dancing or kind of. And then he went and distributed bread to 5,000 people. And all this, it's just kind of, every line that I was reading, I just say, this is, of course, it's corrupted. It has a lot of references in the book that it shows it's corrupted. So on Friday afternoon, I went to the church with the book in my hand. I didn't tell Majid and Mansour to come. I just went and said, this is easy. This is super easy. So I went to the same Muslim guy, in my opinion, and that day he was wearing necktie, totally different, etc. I said, oh, okay. And he saw me. I said, oh, where are your two friends? I said, they're not here. I'm here. Where is your pastor? He said, that guy right there. And he was walking. His name is Pastor Muqaddas, Pastor Holy. And then Holy or Muqaddas is not a famous last name in Iran. I thought he must be like yourself, just thinking of maybe one of those Christian, because Iranians are Muslim, right? In my opinion, Iranians cannot be Christian. So he must be an Armenian. That guy was a Muslim, the janitor. And this guy must be a Christian, an Armenian or Assyrian or something. And his last name was weird, Mr. Muqaddas, who calls himself Holy. Anyways, I went and I said, Pastor Muqaddas, and he said, your name? I said, Mansour. He said, yeah, they told me that you and two friends came and took a copy of the gospel. I said, yeah, I have a question for you. He said, no. We're about to start our worship service. And he said, I hope you are a God-fearing person. I said, of course. And he said, I believe that this is the house of God. Now, you might be able to help me understand if I'm wrong. But for now, I believe this is the house of God. Come and see if God is here. But when we are in this building, we are going to perform namaz, worship, salat. So I want you to respect my understanding. And if you show me that I'm wrong, then we'll talk about it later. And he didn't give me options. He said, come and sit at the back. If you're standing up, you stand up. If you're sitting down, sit down. Don't say anything, okay? I said, okay. And he just walked me to the church. That's it. And then I went to the church and sat down. Surely enough, they started singing and clapping. And then the Mr. Muqaddas went and started speaking in Farsi. Everything was awkward. It was not a worship. Whatever you want to say it was not a worship. As they were talking, blah, 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 and just all sort of things. And at the end, the two beggars came and started begging for money. They brought their begging bags and they were asking money, but just people dropping money. It just a horrible idea. So when the service ended, the pastor went back to the door of the church and everybody started shaking hands. And I was standing there anyways, didn't know what to do next. Just they were saying, nice sermon, nice, all these things. And then when he finished, everybody was out and said, come on, we go to the next building, have chai and shirini, tea and pastries. And I said, okay. He said, how did it go? How was that? I said, I don't know. It definitely was not a worship. I said that bluntly. He said, it definitely was not a worship. I said, okay, let's go to the next room. And the next room, we sat down around a little fellowship hall, and now we call it, understand that was a fellowship hall. And we sat down and he sat by me. And I said to him, look, and I showed him several pages of my New Testament. And he saw my notes on the side. He saw kind of a lot of papers in different pages I put as markers. And then I said, is this truly who you say is God as you said? He said, yeah. He said, if he is God, he should be smart. But this God is stupid. This stupid God turned an element of purity into an element of impurity. Taharat versus as najasat in Arabic and Farsi words. Water is one of the elements of purity, along with sun and soil, etc., dirt. Wine, along with 10 other elements, are considered elements of impurity, like blood, like dead body, like urine, etc. Alcohol is the same. Your God, Jesus, has turned water, things that we bathe and we wash ourselves and we perform wuzu to clean ourselves, into alcohol. That's a stupidity. And he said, yeah, isn't it? And then he said, let's look at that closely together. And he started explaining the Judo-Christian culture to me of the time, the lack of methodologies and techniques to keep water pure and clean, and also the methods that they were using, the importance of wine and grape in the Judaism and the Jewish culture, and all these things, and the wedding and all those things. He put all those clearly together, and the amount of alcohol, the dilution, the water added to alcohols, etc., and all these explanations that he did. And he said, now, do you think that God was stupid? I said, no, this I accept. But I have another question. He said, sure, but look at all these people. Wait until I answer everyone's question and talk to every single person, then it's your turn again. Or you can go home and come back next Friday. I said, sure, I go home and come back next Friday. Surely enough, next Friday, before anybody else, I was at the door of the church waiting with a few more questions, like, why do you say 3 is 1 and 1 is 3? You're bad in math. So I went to the church for the second time, and then the third time, and then after that, Sunday after Sunday, he was answering only one question. Only one question. And I was telling me to come back next Sunday. One thing that happened in the Presbyterian church in Mashhad, that there were Armenians, Assyrians, and Muslim background believers, including people who are like myself, and Baha'is and Zoroastrians who have accepted the Lord. We all were there, sitting down, being served with chai and shirini, tea and pastry, by 3 elderly Catholic French missionaries. They were kind of with the Catholic movement that came to Iran in the 60s. There were 3 brothers and 3 sisters. The brothers were kicked out of Iran. The 3 sisters stayed in Iran after the revolution. They started a hospital in the northwest of Iran. These ladies, they call themselves Mansour, or little sisters in French. The Mansours started a leper hospital in my town, in the suburb of Mashhad, which among Muslims back then, when you were young, lepers were considered unclean also, like the Judaism. So they were kicked out of the community, and these 3 French ladies were taking care of the Muslim lepers. They had a ministry at the Presbyterian church. These 3 Catholic ladies were serving the Muslims and everyone, basically. One person was bringing a plate, the other one cup of tea, and the other one some pastries. And that they did that over and over every single Sunday. That I started kind of observing them. One Sunday, January of 1981, still coming to the church Sunday after Sunday, asking good questions. Some of those questions Mr. Holy was able to answer. Some of those he was not able to answer. Like he was never able to tell me that 3 is 1 and 1 is equal to 3. And whatever he was doing, all the monkey dances, I said, no, 1 is 1. And 3 is 3. Then in the worship service that I was sitting in the back, one Sunday, all of a sudden, the 3 Mansours, the 3 little sisters, who were not participating in worship, came and sat down on the other side. And when everybody was praying long prayers, they started humming a music, a song, not using a word of a hymnal. They hummed. And it was so beautiful that I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. That was the beginning of my relationship with Christ. I closed my eyes and I gave my heart to Christ. I was shedding tears like nothing else. And I was praying loud. And I was not finishing. I didn't know what to do. That is how I gave my heart to Christ. January of 1981. Now, after that, a lot of things happened in my life.